one thing people don't really think about regarding the Old Testament and God is God oftentimes in the Old Testament, maybe he still does it today, I don't know, but in the Old Testament, God certainly used war to discipline various nations. He used poverty. He used famine. He used natural disasters to discipline certain various people groups. I mean, just read any of the prophets. You know, I just started reading Joel this morning, and the book starts off with, you know, did you see? I'm gonna show you. We're gonna read it, but basically, it starts off with a disaster, and God is saying, you know, look at this disaster that happened to you. Basically, like, you know, basically telling the people that the natural disaster that happened to them was a form of discipline. Now, God did that to Israel. God also used Israel to punish other people groups, the Anakites, the Perizzites, and all of, you know, those people groups, the Anakites and all of that. God used Israel to exact judgment on them. And the reason why I say this is, not only did God use Israel, but God used like the Edomites. He used some of the other people groups. And basically what he did was he decreed a piece of land for this particular people group. And he told them to go get it. But there were people living there already. So they displaced the people that were there already and took hold of it literally by God's very command or his decree, which kind of like either he actually ordered it or he allowed it and just expressed that this is what's going to happen. Either one, it was God was in charge of it and he kind of gave the green light. The reason why that's important is a lot of times people talk about what happened to Native Americans. A lot of times people talk about what happened to Africans, different countries and people groups or whatever. And I just want to say, you got to really just think about God's sovereignty, because what if God used a people group to discipline, to punish Native American tribes for their idolatry? What if he did the same thing in other places, right? So, not saying that we should not care about things that happen that we believe to be very terrible and that sort of thing. I'm just saying you just have to keep in mind God's sovereignty, and we don't understand everything that happens. You can't, as a Christian, I mean, if you're a non-believer, there's no point in you listening to the video because you're just going to argue with me. But as a believer, you have to understand God's sovereignty. There's literally not one single thing on this earth that happens without God knowing about it. So God allows certain things to happen, bad things to happen. God causes certain bad things to happen just from reading the Bible. I mean, he'll tell you. He'll send a prophet to tell you, I caused this to happen. You know, God, the world has this picture of God that's all love and no justice, no discipline. God gets real gritty with it. God gets real gritty with it. And when he exacts justice, oftentimes he goes far and beyond what a lot of us, what we would do as humans. And I don't know, just reading Joel and just reading how God operated and used certain people to discipline other people, I just really think that looking at the world and, you know, people trying to, you know, be like these heroes and trying to save everybody or trying to be in other countries' affairs and everything, like, I don't know how that works. I don't know where you draw the line. I don't know where you start, where you say, hey, I have a certain amount of power. I need to use that power for good to protect people, versus God's sovereignty and understanding that God allows certain things to happen. And sometimes it's not meant for other people to intervene. I don't know how any of that works. That's just something to think about. But again, you can't just look at everything that happened in history and just blame it on evil men. Sometimes God caused those things. And I'm going to show you some biblical examples to prove exactly what I mean. Check out this passage in Joel 1:14. Consecrate a fast, proclaim a solemn assembly, Gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. Alas for the day of the Lord is near, and it will come as destruction from the Almighty. Has not food been cut off cut off before our eyes? Gladness and joy from the house of our God? The seeds shrivel under their clods. The storehouses are desolate. The barns are torn down, for the grain is dried up. Oh, how the beasts groan. The herd of cattle wander aimlessly, because there is no pasture for them. Even the flocks of sheep suffer. To you, O Lord, I cry, for fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and the flame has burned up all of the trees of the field. Even the beasts of the field pant for you, for the water brooks are dried up, and fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness. So in that passage there, you see that there's like a terrible, terrible time. There's a famine. The animals are suffering. The people are facing the judgment of God. And it comes in the form of an invading country. And, well, I don't think I read that part yet. But you see that they're going through a famine and that sort of stuff. If you read the earlier part of chapter 1 of Joel, you'll see that God talks about what's happened to them and why. He mentions like them being drunkards. That's one of the things he mentioned. But I'm going to go back and read a little bit more after that to continue on, where he does talk about the discipline coming from a particular nation of people. Joel chapter 2. Blow a trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. Surely it is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. As the dawn is spread over the mountains, so is there a great and mighty people. There has never been anything like it, nor will there ever be again. To the years of many generations, a fire consumes before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but a desolate wilderness behind them. And nothing at all escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses, so they run. With the noise of chariots, they leap on the top of mountains, like the crackling of a flame of fire consuming the stubble, like a mighty people arranged for battle. Before them the people are in anguish. All faces turn pale. They run like mighty men. They climb the wall like soldiers, and they each march in line. Nor do they deviate from their paths. They do not crowd each other. They march everyone in his path. When they burst through the defensive, they do not break their ranks. They rush on the city. They rush on the wall. They climb in the houses. They enter through the windows like a thief. Before them the earth quakes, the heaven trembles, the sun and moon grow dark, and the sun loses its brightness. The Lord utters his voice before his army. Surely his camp is very great, for strong is he who carries out his word. The day of the Lord is indeed great and very awesome, and who can endure it? Yet, even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, and with fasting and weeping and mourning, and rent your heart and not your garments. Now return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and passionate, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness, and relenting of evil. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him, even a grain offering and a drink offering for the Lord your God. So basically, I'm going to stop there reading that, but it basically just goes on and on. But you can see here, it says God calls this foreign army that is vicious, that's powerful. He calls it his army. And he's not talking about Israel, who is his people. He's talking about some other nation's army who are vicious, who are fierce, who are, just like mighty warriors. And God is using them against his own people. God is using this army to discipline his own people. God told them, if you follow me, if you worship me, then God said he would keep them from having diseases. They would have the best land. They would never need anything. He would just protect them. He would protect them from foreign nations. But he also told them, if you don't follow me, you're going to suffer all the judgments of the nations around you that you saw them suffer. Y'all went in and wiped them out. I'm going to have people come in and wipe you out. You're going to have diseases. You're going to have famine. God told them this. And if you read through Israel's history, just read all the prophets. They went through it so many times, it's kind of crazy. But my whole point is, God used another nation to issue judgment against Israel. And you may say that Israel is a special case because God had handpicked them. He wouldn't do that to anyone else or that sort of thing. Some people would believe that. Some people think that God is different today. God is not different today. God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. God doesn't change. God says in Isaiah somewhere, it says, I, the Lord, do not change. God still does. God is still God. Now, I'm going to show you another passage. It's going to be shorter. It's going to be much shorter, but I'm going to show you another passage to show you what I mean. All right, so now we're in Deuteronomy 2, and this is Moses giving the Israelites a summary of their history before he's giving them the law, but he's giving them a summary of what happened, what God did with Israel and how they acted and stuff. So, I'm in Deuteronomy 2 right now, and this is Moses speaking to the Israelites. Then we turned out and set out for the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, as the Lord spoke to me, and circled Mount Seir for many days. And the Lord spoke to me, saying, you have circled this mountain long enough. Now turn north and command the people, saying, you will pass through the territory of your brothers, the sons of Esau, who lives in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. So be very careful, don't provoke them. For I will not give you any of their land, even as little as a footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. So already right here, God has decreed this piece of land for Esau. Now, let's read on and let's see why this is important. Verse 6, you shall buy food from them with money so that you may eat, and you also may purchase water from them with money so that you may drink. For the Lord God has blessed you in all that you have done. He has known your wanderings through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have not lacked a thing. So we passed beyond our brothers, the sons of Esau, who lived in Seir, away from Arabah road, away from the Elath, and away from the Ezion Gibber. And we turned and passed through the way of the wilderness of Moab. Then the Lord said to me, do not harass Moab, nor provoke them for war, for I will not give you of any of their land as a possession, because I have given it to Ar, the sons of Lot, as a possession. So now listen to this, before I even go any further. Do not harass Moab, for I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. God has decreed again another piece of land. He's decreed for a certain amount of people. Now look at this, verse 10. The Emim lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they were also regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites called them Emim. The Horites formerly lived in Seir, but the sons of Esau disposed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place, just as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave them. Now, I'm going to stop there. So think about this. Just the way that God told Israel to displace various people groups, to issue judgment against them, to take that land. Now, if you want to go back, you'd have to go back to when God gave his promise to Abraham, and when God first met Moses, to get the background of, if you don't know, to get the background of why God had him displace those people. Excuse me, and him, just the whole beginning of that. But you have the Edomites, or Esau, which is the Edomites. You have them. You have God using them the same way. Now, I don't see any prophecy, like, as far as I know, I don't know of any prophetic documents of a prophet going to the Edomites and telling them, God, this is what the Lord God said. You are to dispose these people, whatever. Kind of like a breakdown of like how we get with Israel. So the reason why I say that is God told us that he had them do that. But he didn't give us a play-by-play. So if you don't, like, how do we know that doesn't still happen today, where God is issuing judgment against different people groups, and he's having a nation dispose of them because of atrocities that they're doing or whatever, and that new country or whatever, or that new invading force takes over that land because God gave it to them. Now, I'm not saying that that's automatically what happens anytime you see like something terrible happen in the world. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that's something we need to think about, because I just showed you a scripture, and then there's a couple more I can show you, where literally God took a nation. He took two. He did it with Israel. He did it with the Edomites. He literally took two nations, displaced the people who were there, had this foreign nation occupy that land. Well, no, he gave that land to that nation, and they took it forcefully. That's something to think about, because God apparently does stuff like that. And, you know, you can't be on your social justice kick and look at everything that happens in the world with this secular viewpoint of everything that you don't like, or everything that's bad, or every piece of violence is automatically evil and wrong. You have to stop it. You know, I don't fully understand how God operates. I can only go by what his word tells me, but he does do stuff like that. So it's just something that you have to keep in mind. In everything that happens in this world, earthquakes, famine, because we see that God caused the famine. He called a foreign army attacking his own people. He called it his mighty army, because they were doing his will. They were issuing judgment. So we just, in everything that happens as believers, you have to understand the sovereignty of God. God is in control of everything. He allows some terrible things to happen. He causes some other terrible things to happen. And we know that it's only by his grace that all of the good things happen. So we ought not to be so riled up and worked up when terrible things happen. Not saying we shouldn't be sad for people, whatever, but we shouldn't be in a point of despair where, like, you know, there's no God. He's still in control, and he isn't enacting his will upon this earth. His number one priority isn't our comfort. It's his will. And a lot of times we don't know what that is. We won't know what it is, especially involving some other country or some other people. We're outsiders. But I say all that to say, I don't know, I made my point. Like, you just have a biblical worldview of understanding that God ordains all kind of things to happen. You know, terrible things happen in the world, and like a hurricane to come and tear down the neighborhood, and people say, well, where's God? And some people feel the need to say, well, God wouldn't do this. It's just nature. Or, you know, they'll talk about the fall of man, which is actually that makes sense. The fall of man and why we have these things in the first place. But you don't have to apologize for God. You don't have to make a justification for why God allowed things to happen. He has his own reasons. Don't know why. You know, and when you look at different countries, like I said, or different people groups, African tribes or Native American tribes, like we don't know if God displaced those people because of their sin, because he did it to Israel. He destroyed Egypt. He did it to all of the people groups that are in the area that Israel took over. He did that to they were active, full societies, and God completely wiped them out. So, you know, I don't know. Just try not to look at things through such a completely secular lens or a secular moral perspective. If you're a believer, like I said, if you're not a believer, then this video ain't for you, and I'm ignoring any of your comments because this ain't for you. You don't believe the word, then you ain't got nothing to say to me regarding this issue. But if you are a believer, then you got to go by what the text say. The text shows you the way that God is. It shows you the good and the patience and the compassion, but it shows you the heavy hand of his judgment. And you got to accept both. The New Testament doesn't take away God's propensity or his ability to judge or his willingness to judge. The New Testament only covers a few years. The Old Testament covers hundreds of years. You can read between this verse and that verse, and the difference between those verses can be like 20, 30 years. So what you see in the New Testament is that God hasn't changed. It's just that you're seeing more of his patience because it's dealing with a shorter amount of time. If the New Testament covered hundreds of years, you probably see the same thing. You probably see the judgment against the church, judgment against this nation, that nation, whatever, the same way you see in the Old Testament. I have a video on my page about that I'll link, about how God is not different from the Old Testament and the New Testament. All right. So if you like this video, if you found it useful, thank you for watching. I know it's going to end up being long. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.